Hi dear class 12 students, this is Harpreet Kaur and it's time to do the chapter Lost Spring from the book Flamingo prescribed by Ncert. Lost Spring Stories of Stolen Childhood is chapter included in Ncert Flamingo book for class 12. The author Aneez Jung. Let's explore about the author first. Aneez Jung was born in Roorkela and spent her childhood and adolescence in Hyderabad. She received her education in Hyderabad and in the United States of America. Her parents were both writers. Aneez Jung began her career as a writer in India. She has been an editor and a columnist for major newspapers in India and abroad, and has authored several books. The following is an excerpt from her book titled Lost Spring Stories of Stolen Childhood. Here, she analyzes the grinding poverty and traditions which condemn these children to a life of exploitation. So, this is a little brief introduction about the writer of the chapter. She is highlighting the grinding poverty and traditions which condemn these children to have a life of exploitation. What forces these children to have a life of exploitation? What is the reason behind the exploitation of these children who should be in school and getting education, but they are not getting what they should be having? Lost spring. Now, what is lost spring? Spring is the beautiful or the best part, the best season of the year. And in this, glooming and blooming of flowers and vegetation is done. And so, childhood is a time in which the children's glooming and growing up, the child is growing up, and in these years he needs to be nurtured. So, but here she said the spring is lost. The spring of these children is lost, and they are facing exploitation in the hands of the rich men and the powerful people, and they are in the grinding poverty. They are gripped in poverty. And so in the stories that we are going to study here are about the children whose childhood is taken away from them due to poverty. Now, let's look at the first story. The title of the story, Sometimes I Find a Rupee in the Garbage. Now, this is a story in which what are we, from the title itself, what are we expecting? That looking that someone is finding a rupee in garbage, that means someone is looking in garbage. So who looks in the garbage for valuable things? Yes, they are rag pickers. So this is a story of a child who is involved in the work of rag picking. Let's begin with the story now. Let's read the story. Why do you do this? I ask Sahib, whom I encounter every morning scrounging for gold in the garbage dumps of my neighborhood. Sahib left his home long ago, set amidst the green fields of Dhaka. His home is not even a distant memory. There were many storms that swept away their fields and homes. His mother tells him that's why they left, looking for gold in the big city where he now lives. Now, the story begins with a simple question. Like we also keep seeing some children doing something, and a question arises in our mind also. In the same way, a question arises arose in the author's mind also. Why do you do this? She wanted to know about the reason. This word why is telling us that she wanted to know about the reason of why he was doing that work. So where this child was, it is clear that the word neighborhood, and the child used to be there in the scrounging gold in the garbage dumps. Now what is scrounging? Scrounging, we can say he was looking for, he was just finding out, going through the garbage and try to find out certain things from the garbage. And the author, the second thing that the author has told us is about the home, that Sahib's home. His home was, where was his home? His home was a distant memory. Distant memory. Why distant memory? Because he has left it long ago. He had left his home long ago. And why he had left his home, the further we we'll be reading why he left his home. This thing tells us about why he left his home, because there were a lot of storms and it has swept away their fields and homes. So they had become refugee and they became homeless, and they shifted to the big city to look for money, etc., to spend, to make both ends meet, Okay, so his parents shifted to city to make both ends meet. Now let us see what is the reply of the child. The child says, I have nothing else to do. He mutters, looking away. Then the child says, what shall I do? I don't have anything else to do. What shall I do? Looking away. Go to school. The author tells him to go to school. I say glibly, realizing immediately how hollow the advice must sound. She said, I said just as it is. If a child is out of the school, we just advise him or her to move to the school. But immediately she realized that it was quite hollow advice, that this advice did not having. Now what is hollow? That is not something that is not filled. A thing that is not filled is a hollow thing. So in this way, her advice were also hollow, as there was nothing in this advice. She knew that there was nothing in this advice. The child must not be able to go to school. There is no school in my neighborhood. Okay, see that child gave the reason because of non-availability of school. There is no availability of school. So that is why he did not go to school. So if I start a school, will you come? I ask, half jokingly. Yes, he says, smiling broadly. So she offered him to come to her school whenever she will be opening a school. She'll offer. This was a dialogue between that child, the rag picker, and the author a few days ago. And now the author is telling us further that after a few days later, I see him running up to me. Running up to me stands for the child came to her. Is your school ready? So the child came to her with an query. Is your school ready? He was so excited to go to school. He was, he just got a hope that he may be going to school whenever this lady who has asked her about the reason for not going to school will be making her school. It takes a longer to build a school, I say, embarrassed at having made a promise that was not meant, but promises like mine abound in every corner of his bleak world. she got really embarrassed. She felt really embarrassed for making a promise which she wasn't able to feel. And then just to cover that thing, she said that it takes longer time to build a school. Building a school is not quite easy. It takes quite a long time to build a school. So that is what. But then the author says that it is an important line for explanatory questions also. The author says that they are in every corner of his beak. Promises are in every corner of his bleak world. Bleak world means that world that is very small world, but every now and then someone or the other is making promises to them which are never kept. After months of knowing him, I asked him his name. Sahib Alam, he announces. He does not know what it means. If he knew its meaning, Lord of Universe, he would have a hard time believing it. Unaware of what his name represents, he roams the streets with his friends, an army of barefoot boys who appear like morning birds and disappear at noon. Over the months, I have come to recognize each of them. After months of it is the writer Aneez Jung is watching this child and talking to this child for quite a longer time. After it is many months now she has been talking to this child. Then she asks his name. So the name of the child is Sahib Alam, which means the Lord of Universe. Which means the Lord of Universe. And it is hard, Lord of Universe is hard to believe. Look at the irony in this. His name means the Lord of the Universe, but he does not have any money. He has no money. He has no money. Okay, so it is really difficult to believe. If Sahib would have been knowing about the meaning of his name, it would be quite difficult for him to believe. So further, the author is saying that these children start working early in the morning and then they disappear by noon. So she has considered them an army of barefoot boys, because every child in that group is not wearing footwear. Why aren't you wearing chappals? I ask one. My mother did not bring them down from the shelf. He answers simply. So she asks the child the reason of not wearing the chappal. That was a simple answer, that my mother did not get it down from shelf, that she did not buy, so he doesn't have one. Even if she did, he will throw them away. So jokingly other boy said that even he gets a pair of chappals or footwear, he will be throwing it away. Adds another who is wearing shoes that do not match. When I comment on it, he shuffles his feet and says nothing. I want shoes, says a third boy who has never owned a pair all his life. So here the author, the other child who had the shoes make fun of Sahib, and then the author asked him the reason for not wearing the shoes, for wearing that mismatched mismatched pair of shoes. So he felt quite embarrassed, but the third one who was not having any kind of shoe, so he said that he also want a pair of shoes. Traveling across the country, I have seen children walking barefoot in cities on village road. It is not lack of money, but a tradition to stay barefoot is one explanation. So look at the poverty condition, look at the condition of poverty of these children. The author says that during her moving in the country, she has watched many children without shoes, and there is one explanation that it is their tradition to stay barefoot. Parents, in order to cover their poverty, tell the children that it is a tradition. They are so poor that they do not accept this thing. They don't they don't want their children to get depressed for not having shoes and other pair of slippers, etc. They tell them in to calm them, so that they do not just don't have this query in future that it is their tradition to remain barefoot. I wonder if this is the only excuse to explain away a perpetual state of poverty. If the author was really surprised, she wondered if it was just an excuse or it is just to cover the perpetual state of poverty. I remember a story of a man from Udupi once told me. As a young boy, he would go to school past an old temple where his father was a priest. He would stop briefly at the temple and pray for a pair of shoes. 30 years later, I visited his town and the temple, which was now drowned in an air of dissolution. So the author is remembering another incident of a man from Udupi who did not have shoe, and he used to pray God for getting a pair of shoes. He went to temple. Okay, his father was priest and he would stop briefly at the temple before going to his school. He used to pray at the temple for a pair of shoes. And then after some time, after 30 years, the author visited that village once again, and that temple was in the drowned in an air of dissolution. Dissolution means that temple was now quite lonely. The temple was now lonely and there were very less visitors there. In the backyard where lived the new priest, there were red and white plastic chairs. A young boy dressed in a grey uniform, wearing socks and shoes, arrived panting and threw his school bag on a floating bed. Looking at the boy, I remembered the prayer another boy had made to the goddess when he had finally got a pair of shoes. Let me never lose them. The goddess had granted his prayer. Young boys like the son of priest now wore shoes. The young boys like the son of the priest now wore shoes, but many others like rag pickers in my neighborhood remain shoeless. The importance of this incident only is to describe that the children of the higher class people like priest, children of the higher class people like priest, higher class have the shoes, but these rag pickers remain shoeless. These rag pickers remain shoeless. That means the state of, the condition of poverty of the higher class has changed over the time, but the rag pickers are still in the same state of poverty. Dear students, avoid translation to learn English as far as possible. It is always a good idea to re-say things in easy English. Stay hooked to English Frog Club for learning texts and techniques of mastering textbooks. Find links for the other videos in the description box. Do remember to give a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed till now, hit the subscribe button and don't forget to leave the comment about the video, and if you have any requirement for the future, share with your friends about this video.